All right, so listen, we live in kind of this era right now where, yeah, there are still new players coming into the market. We just talked about ESPN Bet launching. We know Fanatics is still kind of in its infancy. We said, hey, 365 seems to kind of be starting to ramp up, but it's not always going to be that, Adam, and that's kind of where we are with this. We know there was, the sale of PointsBet. We figured there was going to be M&A stuff going on, but this is just one of the people that has a good business outside of the state saying maybe the states isn't for us.
Yeah, talking about Kindred and their U.S.-facing brand Unibet, and the parent company announced in its third quarter earnings that it's pulling out of the North American market. They're going to cut 300 jobs as part of that, and they believe that will save $50 million a year. Now, the Unibet brand was active in 6 states: Arizona, Indiana, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Virginia, as well as Ontario, so 5 states and a province. The Unibet brand was essentially one that they tried to pull back from sports betting a year ago and focus more on iGaming, but the adoption of iGaming has not advanced at a rate that I think a company that was struggling in one vertical is going to be able to just turn to another vertical and be able to survive going after that. It's just not coming quickly enough. So ultimately, they underwent a strategic review starting last April, and this is the result of that review. The quote says that the long-term outlook for Kindred in North America has changed since entry. The competitive nature of the market means significant resources needed to close the gap to market leaders, and at our current capacity, that is untenable. And so, Matt, we'll end up asking the same questions that we always ask when it comes to these bit operators. And I say bit operators in terms of what their market share has been in the U.S. Does this market share just naturally bleed out to another legal sports book? Does it go back into the black market? We don't really know ultimately what happens there, but we do know that another one of these larger gambling brands from overseas that tried to make entry into the U.S. market just was not able to keep up with the amount of capital being pumped into the 2 biggest and really the 4 biggest companies.
Yeah, our friends just today, a little bit earlier before we recorded this, our friends over at Eilers speculating that maybe the whole company actually might be for sale, that it could be ripe for some acquisition for that overseas brand. And there have been several United States facing companies that have talked about, expansion, that have talked about getting outside of just the borders of the United States. And some of them already, obviously, Flutter being one of them that is certainly ingrained over there. But there's the MGMs and the DraftKings of the world and stuff who certainly have aspirations of looking beyond just the United States borders. And, maybe that's at least the speculation. Maybe this could be somewhere that they could look, because as we mentioned, there is a viable business over there. We're talking hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue just outside of the United States.
Yeah, I think we can look at 2 places very clearly when it comes to this. First of all, I think it would be natural to look at DraftKings now that DraftKings has gotten itself back into a better capitalized position than it was a couple of years ago. We were hearing rumors about certain purchases when it came to DraftKings that ultimately we didn't think made a lot of sense. I mean, at the price point, yes, PointsBet would have made plenty of sense if they ultimately decided to do that. But of course, that ultimately goes to Fanatics. The other place that you mentioned there, BetMGM, look, we know that BetMGM has made multiple offers to try to buy Entain. We know DraftKings has made offers to try to buy Entain. Maybe this ends up being a lower cost entry point than that. It's obviously not as valuable as Entain, but it would be one way for them to get into some of those other markets where they've expressed an interest in the past.
Yeah, it could be interesting. Of course, we'll follow up on that if anything does come around from all of that. But Unibet, RIP Unibet, you probably didn't have an account anyway. So I'll just leave it at that. That's how we say with some of these, like, the Maxim bets and stuff of the world. We're like, RIP Maxim bet, you probably didn't know it existed. So it's kind of like Unibet, RIP, you probably didn't have an account. Anyway,